Yeah, I'll react to that, sure.
President Donald Trump and his negotiating.
Oh God. So I don't know it fully. I really don't know nothing. I've seen some bullet points. It seems very heavily in favor of Russia. So this is the thing. If I'm Ukrainian, of course, the only justice would be to get all of my territory back that Russia stole, invaded, right? But there are the people who are like, oh, you want more war to continue? You want more people to die? Well, you could just give up all of Ukraine if that you're completely worried about, right? Which is something to be worried about, but so if no one else dies and just Russia gets Ukraine, is that what you want? And then there are people who, especially Ukrainians, who I understand, who are like, nothing but us getting back our territory would be acceptable. But unfortunately, the reality is that things are kind of at a stalemate. And I think NATO, America, Europe, if Ukraine does continue the war, should continue to support Ukraine with as much as they possibly can, material, food, aid, weaponry. But at the end of the day, if Russia does keep its territory that it has invaded and is holding on to at the moment, the only way for a peace plan where they keep that would be at all reasonable is if Ukraine is allowed to join NATO, if they want to, right? If that's not in the deal, then it just seems like you're allowing Russia to be like, all right, we're stopping the conflict, and I'll hopefully slowly get sanctions lifted. I can get my armed forces ready more. I can get a little bit more money in, and then 2 years, 5 years, 10 years down the line, they can just invade again and just try and fully push. And then it's just going to be the same. Okay, sanctions again. And you have China and India to an extent to kind of offset all of the sanctions that the West would put on you, right? So, yeah, I don't want Russia to keep any territory, but if they do, it would just be, to me, I feel like an inevitable future war, and then not so far future that they would be invaded. So, you know what I mean? So, what do I know? Oh, why am I?
Yeah, I'll react to that. Sure.
Yeah, I'll react to that. Sure. Sorry, that's my other video. I gotta move myself down here. Oh, wrong thing. Great. Oh shit. Don't leave. Please don't leave. Boom. Ready. Let's do it. Original link to the video top description, guys. Preemptive like TLDR News EU. My name's Connor if you're new. That rhymed. Poet. Let's go.
Editor-in-Chief Steve Witkoff says, in the past couple of days, there's been a flurry of reports that US President Donald Trump and his negotiator-in-chief Steve Witkoff have come up with yet another peace plan for Ukraine. Like previous plans, it apparently hasn't landed well in Ukraine, with Ukrainian officials likening it to a national surrender. Nonetheless, if the reports are to be believed, Russia has apparently finally accepted the idea of post-war security guarantees. So in this video, we're going to take a look at Trump's latest proposal, how it differs from the previous ones, and whether it could actually succeed.
Love the channel.
The next issue of our magazine, Too Long, is coming out soon, with this issue focusing on realignment in the Middle East, discussing how recent events fundamentally reshape the region. Pre-order your copy or subscribe by clicking the link in the description. So, to understand Trump's latest plan, it's worth starting with a quick recap of his previous attempts at peacemaking. In short, the last time the US and Russia tried to negotiate a peace plan for Ukraine was back in August, after the summit between Trump and Putin in Alaska. But negotiations collapsed within just a couple of weeks, and there were basically three stumbling blocks. First, there was a disagreement over sequencing. The US, as well as Ukraine, wanted a ceasefire before a more comprehensive peace agreement, while Russia said that it would only agree to a ceasefire as part of a fully fleshed out peace agreement.
Well, a peace agreement. Okay, that's kind of a sketchy thing, number one. So the allies of Ukraine want a ceasefire, stop the fighting, and then we'll hash out the agreement to end the war. But Putin's like, no, we're not going to have a ceasefire until we just end the war. But then why would he say, no, we'll have a ceasefire when we end the war? Doesn't that mean it wouldn't be a... Am I being stupid?
Second, there was a disagreement over territory. Russia demanded that Ukraine give up the remaining territory that it controls in Donbass, but Ukraine refused. For context, while Russia controls basically all of the Luhansk Oblast, Ukraine still controls about 25% of the Donetsk Oblast, including the cities of Kramatorsk and Slavyansk. There were reports that in exchange, Russia was offering to give up the little pockets of land it controls in Ukraine's northern oblasts of Sumy and Kharkiv. But A, these reports were never confirmed, and B, this wouldn't be a very equal trade.
No.
Russia was asking Ukraine to give up roughly 7,000 square kilometers in Donbass, while offering something like 450 square kilometers in Sumy and Kharkiv. Thirdly, and finally, there was a disagreement over Ukraine's post-war security guarantees. As we see it, this is both the most important and most difficult issue at play. In short, a security guarantee is the promise by some third country to intervene on Ukraine's behalf in the event of future Russian aggression. Obviously, Ukraine sees security guarantees as necessary for any sustainable peace. After all, without a security guarantee, what's going to stop Russia from invading again once it's rebuilt its forces?
A security guarantee, in my opinion, no expert, let me know if you disagree, is meaningless unless it is a written agreement, legitimate, written down in paper, similar to an Article 5 in NATO. If I'm attacked, it's as if the country ensuring the security is attacked, right? Because if not, then it's just going to be a repeat all over again of like, oh, guys, Ukraine has security guarantees, and then Russia invades, and then it's going to be like, okay, we'll just keep sending you stuff again and put sanctions on Russia, and then you're back at stage one. So
security guarantee, what's going to stop Russia from invading again once it's rebuilt its forces? But Russia has, suspiciously, refused to countenance even minimal guarantees on the ground that they'll violate the principle of indivisible security. For context, the principle of indivisible security basically means that no one country can strengthen its security at the expense of the security of others. It originated as an idea in the Cold War and basically meant that the US and the Soviet Union couldn't deploy forces in other so-called spheres of influence. Russia argues that while they might improve Ukraine's security, Western security guarantees for Ukraine would undermine Russia's security and thus violate the principle of indivisible security. No one else really buys this argument, both because they don't really think that security guarantees for Ukraine do undermine Russia's security, as long as Russia doesn't attack Ukraine again, and also because, more generally, most countries don't buy into the principle itself. Since the end of the Cold War, European countries have stopped thinking in the terms of spheres of influence, and post-Soviet states consider themselves independent actors who should be able to make their own decisions on security matters. In short, Ukraine says that it needs security guarantees, but Russia says no. There was a moment after the Alaska summit when Witkoff seemed to think that he got Russia to accept some sort of security guarantee, telling CNN that Russia had agreed to a, quote, Article 5-like security guarantee. But this was apparently a misunderstanding. Russia quickly came out and said that it would only accept security guarantees if it had a veto over their implementation, which would render them essentially redundant. While the text of Trump's latest proposal isn't public yet, at least at the time of writing, reports suggest that it essentially concedes to Russia on the first 2 points, in exchange for some Russian concessions on the third point. In other words, it doesn't include a preliminary ceasefire.
Am I deaf?
Suggests that it essentially concedes to Russia on the first 2 points, in exchange for some Russian concessions on the third point.
No, that's 3 Putin victories. Okay, I need to...
In other words, it doesn't include a preliminary ceasefire and still requires Ukraine to give up Donbass. But Russia has apparently agreed to let Ukraine have some post-war security guarantees. Russia has apparently made some other minor concessions too. Axios, for instance, is reporting that Russia could give up some land in Kherson and Zaporizhia in exchange, while the Telegraph is reporting that Russia could pay Ukraine some sort of monetary compensation, but has demanded that, as a precondition for any security guarantees, Ukraine must draw down its domestic military. According to reports, Ukraine would be asked to cut its army in half, give up the long-range weapon systems provided by its European allies, and accept the rollback of other US military. According to reports, Ukraine would be asked to cut its army in half, give up the long-range weapon systems provided by its European allies, and accept the rollback of other US military assistance.
What the hell? This is so nothing. So will Russia scale back some of its military capability by 50%? I doubt it. And then you want them to get rid of a lot of the European missile systems. Okay, this just screams of something that is we're gonna talk about in 3 months and be like, another thing has failed. This is insane.
Furthermore, while Ukraine wouldn't be asked to recognize Crimea and Donbass as parts of Russia, something that Zelensky has long refused on the grounds that it's not possible under Ukraine's constitution, the US and other European countries would be expected to. Finally, the proposal also stipulates that Russia be accepted as an official state language in Ukraine, and that the Ukrainian branch of the Russian Orthodox Church be granted formal status in the country. Unsurprisingly, this hasn't gone down well in Ukraine. Ukrainian officials told the Financial Times that the proposal amounted to Ukraine giving up its sovereignty, and called the effort a Russian attempt to play the Trump administration, which they added was eager to show progress on a deal. Similarly, Axios reported on Wednesday Zelensky postponed a meeting with Witkoff and the Turkish foreign minister, who's apparently been involved in the negotiations in protest at the deal. It's also worth saying that Zelensky is currently dealing with the fallout of a massive corruption scandal involving several of his close allies, which means that he has less space to make politically difficult concessions.
What are we talking about? Just give me an AI overview. Dismiss top officials and impose sanctions on close associates after government investigation revealed that $10 million had been embezzled from the energy sector through kickbacks paid by contractors. But that doesn't quite scoring that in more than 3 years of war in Russia, Ukraine faces regular power outages. Allegations of corruption in the energy sector aren't sitting well with the public. Yeah. Calls are growing for Zelensky to remove his longtime chief of staff, Andriy Yermak, considered by many to be Ukraine's de facto. So are they just like betraying Ukraine to get money for themselves? So what does that have to... So is Zelensky under investigation or some of his cabinet?
The deal has allies, which means that he has less space to make politically difficult concessions. The deal has even apparently upset some of Trump's team. On Wednesday, Trump's special envoy to Ukraine, Keith Kellogg, announced his resignation, apparently because he believed fellow US officials were being strung along by Russia. All in all then, the deal hasn't gone down well in Ukraine. Nonetheless, a lot will depend on what these security guarantees actually look like.
Yes.
All we know at the moment is Russia is insisting that no foreign troops be deployed in Ukraine, something that Ukraine's European allies were considering as part of some coalition of the willing. We don't even know if it would just be the US or the US and Europe. Axios, for instance, is talking specifically about US security guarantees, while the Telegraph is reporting that Ukraine would be allowed to ask for security guarantees from both.
It can't just... It needs to be everyone, or a good chunk, US and a lot of other NATO members. For one, I don't think any country, especially the USA right now, should be trusted with that right here. but I just think it would be better to split it among it. And so maybe you don't have to include Ukraine into NATO, even though they should be allowed to in this deal, in my opinion. Let me know if you disagree. But at least having NATO troops in specific hotspots of possible Russian attack, if they decide to attack again, would make Russia have to really think twice if they're just trying to swindle the Ukraine's allies into a deal that he's going to break. Well, now he has to realize that he could easily kill NATO soldiers and then be at war with NATO, right? So, yeah, okay.
With the US and its European allies. So there's a chance that Witkoff has once again misunderstood the Russians, and they might demand a veto over any security guarantees like they did in August. But if Russia has actually accepted the principle of some meaningful post-war security guarantee for Ukraine, this would represent a genuine step towards sustainable peace in Ukraine. When a story like this breaks, though, the headlines aren't just fast, they're fragmented. Depending on where you get your news, you might be
ground news. I'm gonna watch through it. So my takeaway and my opinion here is essentially the same as what I said at the start of the video. If Ukraine is going to be if Russia is going to be de facto controlling some of the territory that they've taken, then I think it should be a non-negotiable. Okay, if you want that, and even then they should be given the decision to join NATO. I feel like that should be a red line. Like, you're not getting all of this, and we're not lifting sanctions and stuff unless Ukraine is allowed to join NATO. Because, I mean, best case scenario is that Putin, if Ukraine doesn't join NATO and Putin just solidifies his control in the territory he stole, and then gets sanctions eventually released over time, and then, gets more money, and then they have the territory, and especially important Crimea. That would be like the best case scenario with a non-NATO agreement for Ukraine. The worst case scenario, or a medium case, is that he just waits for other things to pop up around the world and make people believe that, okay, the war is over, we fixed it and stuff, and then have Russia build up its military again, get some money again, and then super invasion again, and then just try and capture it all again. And then the penalty will be just like they are now, sanctions, and that's it. And they have China and India to rely on. India less so, but definitely China. And so the West doesn't have as much of a monopoly on just sanction power as much as they used to, because of growing economies like China that can support Russia in a meaningful way to help with the sanctions that Russia would receive again. And so if I don't think it should be accepted without Ukraine allowing to join NATO. That would be my opinion. Of course, I'm sitting here in my comfy little, room over here in New England, USA, and my life isn't on the line. And so I'm giving my opinion, but it should be the people of Ukraine to decide whether they want to continue the war or sign the agreement. But hopefully they push for, okay, this is a deal if we're in NATO. Because anything less than Article 5 is just a recipe for a flimsy, useless security guarantee where if they're attacked again, you just go back to sanctions for Russia and then sending military equipment again. So that's my take.
Seeing a completely...
Gonna watch. Hope everyone's doing well. I'm gonna watch the ground news thing here.
Different version of the same events. But if we take a look right now using ground news, we can see that there are 189 sources reporting on it, with most of the coverage coming from
ground
the
news.
right.
Great idea.
If we dive a bit deeper, we can see that the left is framing it as an ominous capitulation, while the right is more optimistic, portraying the plan as revolutionary and a reasonable peace. We're able to get such a detailed analysis thanks to our sponsor, Ground News. If you're overwhelmed by the amount of outlets and stories you're seeing online, Ground News has the solution for you, as they expertly collect and merge thousands of articles into one easy to access place, finally giving you an effortless way to consume news and digest media bias. And it doesn't even end there. Ground News offers you comprehensive breakdowns into the ownership, bias distribution, and factuality of each article, allowing you to dive even deeper into every story. For example, if you're worried about how much you can trust what's being said about a certain event, with a click of a button you can filter and sort every story by their factuality level, helping you easily grasp the reliability of each outlet. It's not just the stories we see that shape the narrative though, it's the ones that we don't. Ground News' blind spot feed is the only feature that shows you stories being ignored by one side of the political spectrum, helping you to break out of your bubble and spot what you might have missed. To give you an idea, here we can see this story on Kellogg's resignation, which would have been completely buried if you lean right, as it's mostly being reported by left-leaning outlets. Ground News doesn't just feed you stories based on your algorithm though, it also allows you to see everything the other side might not want you to.
Unfortunately, I think a lot of people are so entrenched in their political parties that I don't think they want to hear.
Ultimately, that's why we're partnering with them to give you 40% off their unlimited access Vantage plan. All you have to do is subscribe through the link in the description, go to ground.news/TLDR or scan the QR code on screen, and you'll be supporting an independent news platform working to make the media landscape more transparent.
So yeah, if you're still here, guys, love y'all. If you're interested in ground news and you learned about it through me reacting to their video, especially with the new video, make sure to use the /TLDR and the link in the description to their video. So it's the right thing to do. Again, would love to hear everyone's opinions on this. If you think I was wrong or answering any of my questions, would love to see it in the comments. Love y'all. It's not weird to say it, okay? Hope everyone's doing well. See you guys next time. Bye.